Hi, I'm Anna, a marketing analytics consultant from Supermetrics. After watching this video course, you'll learn how to create a Looker Studio report completely from scratch. Let's get started. First, I'll show you how to find and authenticate a Supermetrics connector and create a data source to use in your report. When you open Looker Studio, you'll see the main menu. Select Blank Report from the upper left part. After that, a connector gallery will open automatically. You can scroll down to select the Supermetrics connector you'd like to use, or start typing the name of the connector in the search bar. In my example, I'll be using Facebook Ads by Supermetrics, so I start typing the name of this connector and select it when it shows up at the top of the gallery. After the authentication page opens automatically, click Authorize. You'll be automatically prompted to select the Google account you want to use with Supermetrics. Next, click Allow to give Supermetrics permissions to add the connector to your Looker Studio. After that, you need to select the Facebook Ads account you want to get data from. To do so, click the second Authorize button to the right of this first one. If you belong to multiple Supermetrics teams, select the team you want to use the connector with. After that, proceed to sign into the account following the instructions in the pop-up. When your login is completed, you'll be prompted back to the connector authentication window. You should see all the information about your Supermetrics license at the top. You'll also see all the relevant links in case you want to change the account you're authenticated with. Now, I'll show you how to select an account and complete optional settings for the data source you have just authenticated for. First, select the account you want to use from the drop-down menu below the license information. After that, you can select other optional settings from the drop-downs below. For example, you can choose the conversion window and the report time of action stats. You'll see an Allow report time of action stats to be modified in reports tick box next to every dropdown. When enabled, it allows report editors to modify this value to request additional or different data. For example, if you select multiple accounts, you'd be able to select an account you want to get data from directly without having to come back to the configuration page. You can also select whether you'd like to use owners or users' credentials in the report from the right-hand corner. Owner's credentials setting allows the data source to connect to the underlying dataset using the credentials owned by the person. Viewer's credentials setting requires anyone using this data source to have their own credentials to access the underlying dataset. In addition, you can also rename your data source by placing a cursor next to the default name in the upper left corner. When you're happy with your selections, click Add to add a data source to the report. You will be automatically taken to the report and will be able to see the data source you've just added at the top part of the chart modification menu on the right-hand side. If you want to add another data source to your report, click on the name of the data source and select Add Data from the bottom of the small drop-down list. If you'd like to see the list of fields for a data source, click on the pencil icon next to the data source's name. You can also return to the authentication window by clicking the Edit Connection button on the upper left-hand corner. Click Done when you're ready to come back to the dashboard. You can manage all the data sources added to the report from the upper menu by clicking Resource, Manage Edit Data Sources. If you want to see and edit the list of fields for a data source, click Edit next to a data source's name. In addition, you can choose to duplicate or remove a data source. There are two types of data source connections: embedded and reusable. By default, all the data sources added to the report are embedded, which means they can only be used in a report they're added to. Anyone who can edit the report can also edit a data source and modify its connection. In contrast, reusable data sources can be used in other reports as well. Bear in mind that only people you share reusable data sources with can edit them. and only the owner of this type of data source's credentials can modify the connection. To change the data source type, click Make Reusable next to a data source's name, and then click the Make Reusable button in the pop-up. You will see the type icon changes to a green reusable one. Bear in mind that this action is non-reversible. Once you're happy with your data sources, close the window from the upper right-hand side to return to the report. And now you're all set to start building your Looker Studio dashboard. The first data source you add usually just pops into the report layout with randomly selected fields. I'm going to delete it for now and just take a look at the user interface. First, I'll give the report a proper name so I can find it with this name later on. For example, if it is a client report, add the client name and the core idea of the report. I'm going to call my report Looker Studio Training. There is a main menu under the report's name. From here, you can add elements, manage pages of the report, and arrange the elements on the page, among other things. There is another menu ribbon right below the top menu. Let's take a closer look at it. You can add elements to your report by clicking Add a Chart. There are multiple chart options available from the drop-down. Filters and controls are added from the Add a Control drop-down. You can also add images and shapes and access theme and layout from this upper menu part. Let's add a couple of elements to our dashboard. I'll add a scorecard, a time series graph, a bar chart, and a table. Scorecards are metric cards to represent your KPIs. Usually you want to have more than one, but I suggest you include no more than 10 on one page to make sure you're not acquiring too much data from one data source at a time. I'm going to copy these scorecards with Ctrl+C and paste them with Ctrl+V. Now there are 3 scorecards. I want these to present different values, so I just click on the first one, and now that it is selected, you can see a blue rectangle around it. Then I can edit it from the right-hand side menu. On the top of the right-hand side menu, there are 2 tabs, Setup and Style. Setup is where you can configure the data presented, and in Style, you can change how the element looks visually. At the top of the Setup tab, there is a data source associated with this selected element. Now, if I click on it, I can change the data source for this scorecard. I can select any data source that is added to this report or any reusable data source. I'll continue using a Facebook ads data source. Below the data source, you can select the metrics and dimensions. Because I've selected the scorecard, I can only see the metrics option. Let's select impressions as a metric for this scorecard. The easiest way to do this is to click the selected metrics and the menu will open beneath it. I can now search for the metric I want to use. I'll select the second scorecard and change the metric from this drop-down to clicks. I want to use CTR as a metric for the third scorecard. The name of this metric is quite long, so I need to shorten it to make it more readable. I can do so by clicking on a pen icon and rename the metric just to have CTR percentage on it. Now I have 3 KPIs on top as scorecards. I can select all of them, and because they are the same element type, I can apply changes to all of them at once using the right-hand side menu. For example, I can change the style or set the comparison date range in one go from the calendar view. I'll select previous year as a comparison date range for all 3 elements. I can select the color of the upwards, downwards arrow in the styling section. Sometimes the downwards arrow can be colored green and not red, for example. If CPC goes down, as it is a positive change. You can select comparison colors for individual cards and set the downwards arrow to be green and the upwards arrow to be red. In my case, the default colors are fine, so I'll keep them as they are now. I'm now going to select these two cards with impressions and clicks and select the compact numbers option from the Style tab. You can also change the text alignment. For example, you can center the text. You can also change the background and border. I'm not going to touch the color, but I do want to make the element corners a bit rounded. If you want to have a border, you can also add it from here. Now, my CTR cards look a little bit different. I can copy one of these two cards, then select the CTR card and choose the Paste Special option from the top menu. This will only apply the style to this card. If your cards are not aligned, you'd need to select all the cards, then go to Arrange menu on the top, select Align Vertically, then Top, and then Distribute horizontally. Now that scorecards are all done, let's go to the time series chart. Let's select the time series chart and take a look at the setup for this element. I have a data source associated with it, and I'll keep it as it is. As for the dimensions, I definitely want to keep the date on the x-axis, as it is a time series, and I can select impressions and CTR as metrics. I'm going to rename the CTR field again, as I did with the scorecards. I can see the impressions, but the CTR line looks flat now. And that is because we're trying to visualize both impressions and CTR on the same axis. I need to go to the Styling tab to fix this. In the Styling tab, you can see different options for changing the style of this element. Here it says Series 1, and this means the first series of the graph. In our example, this is the number of impressions. The setting indicates that I'm using a line, but I can change it to a bar form here. I can also change the color of this individual element if I want to. I usually change all my colors from Theme and Layout section so that I always only use specific colors in a certain set order. I can also choose to show data labels. I'll keep the CTR as a line format and then change the axis to be on the right. Now this time series chart is much more readable. Let's take a look at configuring a bar chart. I want to break the metric down by campaigns using a breakdown dimension. So I'm going to select the campaign name here. And then I want to see the campaigns that have the most clicks. Therefore, for the metrics, I'm going to select link clicks. Because our campaign names are a bit long, I need to adjust this axis to show the full campaign names. If you see an empty space like this, it would suggest that maybe you need to give more space for the campaign name. You can break the metrics down by one or multiple dimensions using a table chart. For dimensions, I'm going to select campaign name, add set name, and for metrics, let's go with impressions, link clicks, and CTR percentage. You can set the default sorting by impressions, for example. You can then also sort the table by clicking the headline of the column. Say you want to sort it by clicks. Let's revert this back to default by clicking this pen arrow on the left-hand side top corner. For table visualizations, there is an option to highlight metrics columns. On the Style tab, when you scroll down, you can see the metric settings. The column 1 would mean the first metric column, which in this case is impressions. From this drop-down, you can see that there are 3 different kinds of tables: bar, heat map, and number. When I click on one, I can see that all the columns actually have changed to show the bar. I can add the number there as well. If you select this heat map, I can see that all values in this column have now a heat map associated with them. The number selection is the default one, with no extra visualization. You can select each column to select different kinds of styling. Let's set our impressions and clicks metrics to bars, and then the CTR percentage column to heat map. Now that you know how to add metrics and dimensions to table and change the table style, the report is starting to look more and more complete. But there is one issue here. I'm not completely sure what the time range is. You can add a date range control from the top menu. Now you can see that it only says auto date range, which is a bit ambiguous. To change this, I can select the default value to the control from the right-hand side panel. If you change it directly from the control, then it will not update as a default one, but would revert back to the original selection when refreshing the report. With this control selected, you can access the date from the right-hand side panel. You can choose any from several predefined options, but you can also use an advanced option. When using an advanced option, you can be very specific about what you want to configure. First, you'd want to set the start date. You can either select a fixed date or set it to be dynamic. For now, I'll set it as a dynamic one. I'm going to use today minus 3 weeks. These will be full weeks, each starting on Monday, so it will calculate 3 full weeks from today. And for the end date, I'll set today minus 1 day, so the date range will include yesterday as the latest date. You can add more than one control to your report. Let's use this drop-down filter as an example. When the control is selected, you can see which data source it's filtering and select which dimension it's using as a control one. As for the metric, you can choose impressions, for example. You can select not to show impressions in control, but impressions could still be used sorting the order of campaigns in the control panel. Let's add a setting to sort by campaign name in ascending order so that we're looking at them from A to Z. Now let's apply this filter. You can see that all the elements on the page are affected by the campaign control. Let's say you don't want to filter everything on this page with this control. In this case, you can select all the elements with the control that you want to filter while holding a Shift key down. Next, select Group from the right-click menu. Now that I have grouped elements with the control, I can change the campaign. As you can see, only the elements within this group have been filtered by the control. It's good to note that a campaign control can't filter campaigns from other data sources. As a rule of thumb, controls can only affect the data source they're associated with very few exceptions. And this is how you can apply filters and controls to your report. There is also another way to filter the report. That's done using cross-filtering. First, let's ungroup the elements. To do so, I select the group that I just created, right-click to see the menu, and then select Ungroup. I select the bar chart, and when I scroll down in the Setup tab, I can check if the cross-filter is enabled. When the cross-filtering is on, I can select one of the campaigns from the bar chart. You can see that all other elements on the page now filter accordingly. If you want it to only affect certain components, you can create a group from elements that you want to be part of the cross-filtering. You can also create filters to only show filter data. I'll cover that in the next video, which goes over more advanced ways of working with Looker Studio. There are a couple of other selections in the Setup tab that will help you make your report more interactive. I'll show the drill down setting and the optional metrics setting. Let's first go over the dimensions drill down option. To select the drill down, I'll first need to select time series chart. Next, I open the Setup tab. Right now, there is only date as a breakdown dimension. Now, I'll turn the drill down option on and two more dimensions appeared, year and year-month. I can change the name of the year-month dimension to month by clicking on the pencil icon. I can also change the way the dimension is displayed. I can also add another time dimension by clicking the Add Dimension option. For example, I can add a weekly breakdown. Now I have established a hierarchy of year, month, week, and day. Let's see how this drill down works in practice. When you hover over the time series chart, you will see the errors. The report viewer can toggle select between them to show the data on different breakdown levels. It's good to keep in mind that even though I have a monthly breakdown, the date range control defines the time period I'm looking at. So months in this case might not necessarily be complete months. You can also use the drill down setting on a table, for example. Here I have a campaign name and the ad set name. Let's put the drill down option on. I can set the default selection to be on a campaign level and use the drill down to aggregate the data on different levels within one table. As you can see, the drill down option is a very powerful tool to aggregate your data on different levels, so you don't have to create too many graphs. There is an optional metrics setting for your data source metrics. In this video, I'll show you how it works. I'm selecting the bar chart where I'm currently looking at impressions. If I click this optional metric setting on, I can add other metrics to the bar chart that won't be visible in the first view. Let's add clicks and CTR percentage. Once the optional metrics are added, and I hover over the bar chart, I can find a new icon on the top of it. This is the optional metrics icon, and I can see our newly added metrics under it. I can now go and select other metrics, and the campaign in the bar chart will be sorted accordingly. Now that I have a dashboard created, let's take a look at some styling options for the dashboard. First, let's add a header. I'm going to use a rectangle from the Add Shape menu. Next, I'm drawing the rectangle shape at the top of the page. Then I can select a color for it from the right-hand side. After that, I would like to move it behind our date range control, so that I could see the control clearly. I can again arrange the elements either from the right-hand side mouse click or from the Arrange drop-down from the main menu. Now, I'm going to style the date range control a bit too, so that I can see it better at the top of the header. I'm going to select the background color to be white, and then I want the corners to be rounded too. To remove the default shadow, I need to click the shadow on and off. Now the header looks better. Next, let's add a logo by clicking the Add Image button. You can either use a URL or upload the logo from your desktop. I'm going to fetch the logo from my folder on my computer. I'm going to move it on the top of the header, and now the header is ready. The first page is ready, but rather than adding more elements to one page, you might want to split your dashboard into several pages and sections. Let's add one page from the Add Page button. This opens the right-hand side panel for managing pages. Now it shows 2 untitled pages, so I can go ahead and rename these pages. Let's name the first page FA, as in Facebook Ads, Main, and then the second page could be named FA Campaigns. The button Add Page is changed to Pages, so you can flip through pages in the report. If you click Page, Manage Pages, you'll see the menu on the right-hand side where you can add new pages or sections by clicking a big plus sign. You can edit an individual page by clicking on 3 dots next to the page or section's name. For example, you can select icons for your pages or sections. You can also rename and delete them from this menu too. And you can change the order of the page and sections by dragging and dropping. And now you've learned how to organize your report with page and section management options. Something to be aware of when adding pages is that any control that you create is only affecting the page it is added to. Let me demonstrate how it works. I'm going to copy the impression scorecard from page 1 to page 2. However, now you can notice that the number of impressions is not the same, and that is because the time range we're looking at is not the same. On the first page, I have date range control, and on the second page, I don't have it, so it's using a default date range. What we can do is set a control or element to be report level element. First, I'm going to move our date range control to another spot in the report, and I'm going to explain why I did it in a bit. You can do this either from the drop-down menu when you right-click or through the main menu under Arrange, Make Report Level. Now, when I go back to page 2, the same date range control is here too, and now the scorecard impressions are matching on both pages. I move the element away from the header because the report level element's position, by default, is at the bottom of the report, meaning it would have disappeared when I did the change. Let's move it to the top of the header so you can see that the header rectangle is at the top and we can only see a portion of the control component. Let's change this date range control back to a page level 1 and move it back to the top right corner. What I actually want to do is set this whole header to be a report level header. To do this, I need to select all elements from the top, and now I can change them to be report level components. Let's take a look at how you can modify the theme and the layout of your report. There are 2 tabs under Theme and Layout section, which are Theme and Layout. Under the Theme tab, we can either pre-select an existing theme or download an image from a computer or from the URL, and Looker Studio will create a theme based on the image. I'm going to add an image URL here, and now there are 3 different options I can choose from. I'm going to go with the default one and make changes to that one. If I know that I want to use a dark layout, I would select a black ready-made theme to be my base, but as I'm going with lighter colors, I'm just going to select the first option. There is an option to customize the theme on the panel. I can now, for example, change the background color of the report in the Customize section. Let's add a light gray background. Then the component default color would change the colors of the components. You can see that the background colors have all changed for different elements. However, if you have changed those colors separately for each component, then the whole theme will not be affected. For example, let's select one of the scorecards and go to the Style panel to change the background. Let's pick a yellow color. Now you can see that the background color for this element has been changed. Even if you make changes to the theme, the scorecard would not be affected by the background color change. If you want this element to follow the theme, you can go back to the Style section and reset the color setting. One of the most handy settings of the theme is that you can change the theme data chart colors. Usually, you'd want these colors to be your brand colors, and you can set them in specific order. You can also change the comparison arrow colors from this section. At the very bottom, you can find styling for the dashboard navigation panel. You can set the background and the menu link colors. And this is how you can modify the theme of your report. Now let's take a look at the layout section. Let's take a look at three components of the layout section: page navigation styling, canvas size selection, and report level component position. First, let's go through page menu navigation styling options. You can set the navigation menu position from here. Let's make that to be a tab on top of the page. Now I'm going to show how that looks in the view mode. You can see the margin between the top navigation and the dashboard is gone. You can see that there is still the space around the dashboard. This is because the dashboard width is set to actual size. You can change this by selecting the Fit to Width display mode. Now, when you check the view mode, you can see that the dashboard fills the whole screen. Now, let's take a look at the canvas size selection. You can set the page size for all the pages in the dashboard here. You can also set the individual pages to have a different size. You can do this by going to the main menu and clicking Page, Current Page Setting. That will open the page setting on the right-hand side. You can then change your page size for the current page you're viewing. Lastly, let's go through the report level component position. By default, it's at the bottom, so the components might not be visible when you make some elements to be report level. You can select Top for report level components to show at the top. Now you know how to use the layout section of the report and where you can change the page navigation style, adjust the canvas size, and the position of report-based components. In this video, I'll explain how data filtering and sorting options can help you create relevant charts in Looker Studio. Let's start with a real-life example. Our content team wants to know which blogs in the website have the most engagement. Firstly, I'll create a table with page path as a dimension and engaged sessions as a metric. However, now page path returns information about all the pages on our website. I need to narrow it down to only blogs. The blog URL always contains the word blog, so I can use a filter to narrow down the data. To do so, I'd need to go to Setup, scroll down, and click Add a Filter. I select the field that I want to filter, in this case, page path. Next, I'll choose the contain condition and type blog. Let's name it blog filter so I can find it later on and save it. Now, I filtered the table to show only the pages that contain the word blog in the page path. To know which ones have the most engaged sessions, go to Sort and select Engage Sessions in descending order. Great! Now our content team knows which blogs had the most engagement. You can find and manage your filters by going to the Resource menu and clicking Manage Filters. With a filter, you can either exclude or include data based on a certain condition. Filters have several conditions such as equal to, contains, starts with, in, is null, and the possibility to do more advanced filtering using regex. To create filters based on several conditions, you can use OR and AND operators. Now, let's take a look at adding a calculated field to your report. Here, I have a scorecard with the total amount spent for this month and a table broken down by campaign. The default currency of our Facebook account is euros, which means that that's the currency we're looking at. Let's say I want the dashboard currency to be in Chinese yuan instead. Our finance department said that they would send us an email with different conversion rate every month. I need to set up a dashboard in a way that allows me to change that conversion rate every month pretty easily. To start, let's go to the data menu on the right, when you can find the list of fields available by default from the connector. To add a new field, click Add a field. The euro to Chinese yen average conversion rate for the month of October shared with us is 7.08 yen, equal to 1 euro. So I'll type 7.08 and write a descriptive title under field name. Click Save and then Done to close the window. I can now find my new field on the list, and it is marked by the FX symbol. Now I need to add the calculated field to the table. A calculated field is a formula that performs some action on one or more fields in your data source. Calculated fields can perform arithmetic and math, manipulate text, date, geo information, and assign values based on conditions. I'll multiply the amount spent by conversion rate and add a field name. Now I can reuse that field in other charts. When our finance department gives me a new conversion rate for November, I can edit the conversion rate field. The entire report will adjust to the new rate. Also, if the same data source is used in several dashboards, all these dashboards will update. It is also possible to add a calculated field to a chart. However, the calculated field will only be a part of that particular chart, and you cannot reuse it in other charts. I recommend creating calculated fields in the data source when possible. The data blending feature allows you to join data from different data sources. Let's take a look at how it works. Here I have 3 tables, one from Google Ads, one from Facebook Ads, and finally, one from Google Analytics. Our goal is to blend those into one table to create charts, tables, controls, and calculations based on fields from these different data sources. To start a blend, from the beginning, go to Resource, Manage Blends, and then click Add a Blend. Now I can configure the primary table from Google Ads by adding a dimension, metrics, and table title. I'll click Join another table and select the data source. In this case, it's Facebook Ads. Then I'll add the metrics and dimensions as I did in the previous step. I do the same with Google Analytics. Blends are made up of tables, and each table contains a set of fields extracted from the underlying data source. One limitation is that a blend can have a maximum of 5 tables. Now is the time to tell Looker Studio how the tables are related. I do that by selecting a join key. If you look at the tables, the common field among all 3 tables is date. That will be the join key. While the date name matches in this example, the field's name is irrelevant. What makes the blend work is the values or data inside the join key that needs to match between these 3 tables. In my tables, there is only one date per row, which is what I want because in this example, the join key needs to have unique values for the blend to work. Now click Configure Join, and on Join Conditions, ensure the date field is selected. There are different other join operators you can choose from. In this example, I'll show you the left outer join. As you can see on the graph, the left outer join keeps all the rows from the left table and returns only the matching rows from the right-hand side table. Name the data source and click Save. I can close this window now. Let's add a table and use the blend I've created as a data source. I can now select fields from different data sources like amount spent from Facebook and cost from Google Ads. You might have noticed that the row containing data for October 17th is missing, even though there is data for October 17th in Facebook and Google Analytics tables. Let's investigate the cause. Google Ads is our left table, so all the rows from Google Ads are returned, but only the matching rows from Facebook Ads and GA are returned. Since there is no October 17th in Google Ads, I'm excluding that row within the process. However, that's not what I want, as I need a primary table with a row for each date. In our case, I know that there are sessions for every day in Google Analytics. In other words, a table will have a date every day. This is a better candidate for the leftmost table, so let's change the order of the tables. Now I have a table with the date every day coming from Google Analytics, and the fields missing from Google Ads on that date now appear as nulls. So I'll proceed to add all the fields to complete the table. I now have a table with data from 3 data sources. I want to know how much I spent on online advertising in total. Let's create a scorecard with a calculated field for that. Make sure your blended data source is selected and create a new calculated field. Now I have the total spent on Google Ads and Facebook Ads. You can confirm that the sum is correct by looking at each value separately, as I have here. One caveat with the calculated field is that you can run into issues if one of your values results in a null. Let's see how it works in practice. I know that for October 17th, I have null values for Google Ads. So let's filter the report to only show that date. Since the amount spent in Google Ads is null, Looker Studio returns no data on the sum, even though there is data for Facebook Ads. To fix this, you can use the coalesce function. Let's type the formula that replaces any nulls if it finds the rows with zeros. That way, you can avoid this issue. Let's complete the formula. The result is correct now, even when there are nulls. And this completes our Looker Studio onboarding course. Thank you for joining. You have now learned how to create data sources using Supermetrics connectors and add elements to your pages. You now also know how to style your report, create calculated fields, and join data from multiple sources using the data blending option. Happy Looker Studio reporting!